Hey everybody, welcome to K&A Mobile Auto. Today what we're going to go over is how to change the brake rotors on a 2011 Chevy Impala LT. Now these rotors are warped, and that's why we're changing them. And I'm just showing you all the basic tools and the basic things that you'll need. So here we got our jack stands, and then we have our penetrating fluid just in case if anything's stuck. We also have our brake fluid. You'll definitely need plenty of that. We have a breaker bar right here. So you got your brake fluid and then you got your brake cleaner. You'll definitely need a brake cleaner because these rotors come with a nice little coating on it, fluid coating, to help keep them from rusting in shipment. So you just need to spray them down so that's all clean. You want to make sure you don't have any leftover residue. Now on this Impala, what the next step that you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure that it is nice and safe to lift up. So in order to do that, the first thing you want to do is come over here, put your foot on the e-brake, and make sure that's engaged. So we got the jack stand underneath the frame. I'm just going to slowly put it under there. Because you want to have the weight of the car sitting on the jack. And then what we'll do is we'll just lift this back up. So this helps hold it up. All right, now we're gonna take off the lug nuts. And normally you'll want to use the breaker bar for this, but we have this nice little power tool, so we're gonna use that to make it a little faster. Go, and the tire just slides right on off. And now as you can see, this is the rotor, and you got the brake caliper here, you got the brake pads right there. If you come back here, you can see the back ones. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn this to the right so it's easier to work on these brakes so we can get at them. What we're going to do is we're going to actually loosen this up so we can bleed the brake a little bit to relieve some of the pressure so we can get these brake pads out and loosen so it's easier to take off the caliper bracket bolts, mounting bracket. To loosen it up, and what we're going to do is we're going to spray some PB Blaster on there, or some WD-40, whatever you have, to make it loosen up so it's not so tight. Alright, so we're going to break this bleeder valve after it's been sitting there for a little bit. Break it loose so it makes it easier to compress brake pads. Since the rotors are warped, what we're going to do is end up replacing the pads anyways, because you want to do that anytime anything's warped or ruined like that on these vehicles. What we're doing here is we're just using the pry bar to wedge it in there to get the caliper and the pads to collapse. You can see it's really tight in there. Just gotta get it where I can get a piece of that. See, we got that in there. If you also notice that brake fluid's pretty dark, and it shouldn't be that dark. It should be nice clear color. You want to make sure your brake fluid's nice and clean. So now that we got those compressed, be able to tighten that back up. Tighten that back up so we can not have so much air in the line. We're still going to have to flush out the brake fluid. I have to bleed the brakes. They'll break on you.
they stop draining.
Alright, so the next step that we're going to do is now we're going to come in here and take all these bracket bolts that are holding the caliper in. Spraying it down with some brake fluid. Some of the times these are a really big pain in the butts, but luckily for us, these ones weren't too bad. And there we go, that's your brake caliper. And then these are the brake pads. They just pop right in and right off. And then when doing this, you'll always want to make sure this is sitting up somewhere off to the side, so that way you're not putting stress on this brake line back here. If you put too much stress, it'll ruin it, then you have a bigger headache to do replacing those brake lines. All right. Well, that one is not coming out, so we're gonna have to blast that with some PB blaster and let that soak for a minute. All right. Sometimes what you'll need to do is use a wrench to help break it free. We were able to get that, so now this should be able to pop right on out. There we go. That comes out. We'll move this back here so it's out of the way. There's no pressure really on that brake line. And then as you can see, this rotor is ready to come on right on off. So let's just pop that right on off. And there we go. That's the end of that rotor. Doesn't feel too bad. It's got a little lip right here, as you can see. It's got a little bit of a lip. Trying to find out where you can. Most of the time, if it gets pretty bad on with the rotors being warped, you can see. But as you can also see, all these lines in here, that's not good. All those grooves. You don't want it to be all grooved in. You want to be a nice, flat, smooth surface. And if you come over here to these, you can see. Nice, smooth surface, completely flat. Now the difference between this one and these, obviously as you can tell, this one's got some holes that are drilled through it. Drilled all the way through it, and then it's got these little slots in there. Now the slots are here to help keep this caliper run a lot cooler, and the drilled holes in it is to help water. Like if you have a bunch of water that gets on your brake calipers, that helps keep your brake calipers dry when it's in rainy season or you're going through water or what have you. Now, these ones still work great because they have these little ventilation slots on them. These also have those ventilation slots on them, as you can see. So we're going to put those on next. Now, don't forget, what you want to do is you want to come over here, grab this brake cleaner, and spray them off, since they come with some packing oil on them to help keep them clean.
Anti-rusting.
Yeah, it keeps it from rusting. Alright, and you just need to line the holes up with the studs. There we go. Now what we'll want to do, we're just going to put one of these lug nuts on to help hold it in while we put the caliper back on, and put the brake pads, the new brake pads and all that back on. All right, and then one thing that you always want to make sure you do is you want to grease up these slide bolts. If you don't, you could have some wonderful issues later on.
Basically seize into the caliper, like this one has done.
Yeah, as you can see, this basically doesn't have anything on it. So we're gonna make sure these are nice, lubed up.
Lubrication is key. Don't be stingy with your lube, guys. It helps. Or girls, for that matter. You keep that bitch in there.
I'm not doing anything.
You're gonna leave it.
So one thing we noticed is as this caliper's up on here, the dust shield was rubbing up against the caliper. So all we're doing is just bending it a little bit. This tends to happen every now and then. So all we gotta do is bend it out. It's no big deal. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this bracket back on. And this is the caliper bracket. Put those bolts back in. Got one here, one right there. There we go. Got on nice and tight. All right. And then we definitely do not want this brake. We don't want this caliper bracket to come off, so what we're going to do is we're going to torque it down to 125 foot-pounds of torque. So we make sure that this does not come loose. There'd be nothing worse than having it come loose while you're driving, and then all of a sudden you don't have brakes on one side. All right, now we're going to spray everything down with brake clean.
We're gonna try to clean it up and lubricate clips in here.
Okay. All right, we're just lubing up this hardware so everything moves nice and easy. This will also help stop any squealing that you might have. And then what we're actually going to do, these brake pads weren't warped or anything, so they feel pretty smooth. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put them back on.
You'll always want your inside pad to have the squeaker, because the inside of your pad is the most common to go out the quickest. We'll set it in there.
You just got to slide that in. There we go. Put those on. Now, what we'll need to do is grab the bracket.
It's actually the caliper. But
Caliper.
yeah, all right.
There we go. Hand tighten these bolts in because you don't want to just throw them on with a impact and strip them, because then you're going to be in a world of hurt.
Cross-threading. So these you don't want to get too tight either. You kind of want to get it just about that much power, probably like 125 with your hands, because these can break easy too if you put too much torque on them.
All right, so now that the caliper's on, everything's on, it's all nice and lubed, what we're going to do is we're going to turn the steering wheel back on so it's easy to put the tire, and then we will be good to go and all done with this side. All right, and you just roll the tire back over. Make sure you put the correct side of the tire on. Go, and we just got to screw in the lug nuts, and that will be the end of that rotor. And as you can see, it fits all nice in there, perfect. Now, even though we used an impact gun to put those on, the biggest thing you want to do is always make sure these are torqued to spec. What we're going to do is we're going to torque them down to 100 foot-pounds.
100.
But before we torque them down, what we're going to do, going to come down here, drop that. Okay, we're just going to remove this. We're going to lower the car nice and slow down. Make sure we're safe. There we go. Now that it's all down on there, now you can torque them down to spec. 100 foot-pounds of torque. You always want to do it in a star pattern when you torque it too. There we go. That is how you change the brake rotor on a 2011 Chevy Impala.
Welcome to K&A Mobile Auto. I'm the A of this company, just to let you know, Austin. All right. Today we're going to do rotors on a 2010 Chevy Impala. Same thing. Exactly the fucking same. I don't like your fucking attitude.
Oh my god.
I just talked to you, said fuck it. That's all I said, and then I was taking off the tire. Okay, here we go. You tell me when to go, I guess. Okay, first of all, you're going to loosen your slider bolts for your caliper. On this driver's side. They're pretty easy, usually. Sometimes they're not as easy. Then you're going to take a pry bar. I like to use a pry bar. A lot of places have their little brake caliper compressor tool, but this makes it easier on me. Well, at least I think it's going to be easy. Sometimes it's not as easy. And we're just gonna compress the brake pad in. Always want to use your brake pad to compress your cylinders in, because if you're in the cylinders and it's gonna start leaking brake fluid, then you need a whole new caliper, and that just makes it more expensive. Okay, we got that loose. We're gonna undo the slider bolts. We're going to set the caliper up top here. You never want them really hang down. And then we're going to take your slide pins out that make your brakes slide in and out easy. See, that one was a little bit seized in there because it's been a while. Luckily we got it out. Sometimes if they're seized, you have to burn them out completely with a torch, and that takes forever as well. So get it nice and lubricated. Lubrication's key. Slide her in. And see how more easy that moves now. Okay, we'll try the top one. See, the top one was better. Do the same thing. Get it all lubricated up. And you put the slide pin back in there. Okay, now you take off your pads. We'll clean off the old hardware since we're not changing pads on this today. Usually they come with new hardware, sometimes they don't, so cleaning it off will make it less squeaky if you ever have squeaks. So now we're going to take off the caliper bracket, which is 2 bolts, 15 millimeter. Those came out a lot easier than the passenger side. And you pull that off. And then you pull the rotor off. And this is your wheel bearing and hub right here. It's That's what your rotor sits on. Okay, and when you get rotors from the store, they'll have an anti-rust component, like a little slimy looking stuff sometimes. This one's not as bad. All you do is just spray it with brake clean. So you just wipe it down. And remember, if you're doing rotors, you're going to have a little bit of smoke come out when you're doing your first braking. Don't worry, it's just burning off the rest of the adhesive that was put on it. Put it on. You'll grab a lug nut just to hold it flat against there so you have no issues with putting the bracket or caliper back on. Just makes it a little easier. Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and put the bracket back on here. This makes it less hot on your braking. But if you want, you can do it. I don't care. I'm surprised you got these fancy rotors for it. This is not going as planned. This side as it was. So you get those twisted in finger tight. Make sure you get them finger threaded first, because you don't want to cross thread these, or you're going to have a massive issue trying to get them off again if you ever do it again. So we'll bolt down the caliper bolts. Then we'll torque it to 125 foot-pounds on the bracket. That's where I like to do it. So we'll do that. Out of everything, you want your brakes to work properly, much as anything else, because you don't want to have a malfunction in your brakes. So there's that. And then we'll lubricate the hardware that your pads sit in, because sometimes if you don't lubricate these, the pad will grip to them and it'll push them towards the rotor, making you have a squeak when you're not supposed to have a squeak. So slide them back in. So we're not doing pads today, as I mentioned. Okay, they all went in rather easy. And we'll put caliper itself back on. And if you want to start working on cars, you're going to learn a lot of patience. If you don't have patience now, this will teach you how to have patience, believe me. Sometimes it just doesn't go your way. Okay, we got those finger threaded in, so we can start tightening those down. Now you don't want to tighten these too much, because they can break. And then you're going to need a whole new caliper and bracket, which is another money problem. So you want to get where it hits face, and then kind of give it like 2 really good pumps. And there you have it. That's how you do brakes on a 2011 Chevy Impala. And once you're done with putting your pads on, your calipers are still going to be decompressed. So before you turn your car on at all, you want to pump your brake pedal all the way down until you feel it get tight. See how it's getting tighter? Okay, because you don't want to jump in this car after doing brakes and then you hit the car in front of you or whatever, because nothing's going to happen. You're just going to run forward. Okay? So, now, start the car. Make sure your brake light is out and your ABS light's out. So we got the e-brake on, so that's not going to happen. Now it's out. So you want to put it in reverse. Keep your foot on the brake. Make sure it's not moving. Then forward. but you're not moving. So then you want to move a little, and then press your brakes. Stops quick, pretty much set. And to be extra careful, maybe take it around the block once to make sure everything's working right. Alrighty, that's K&A Auto.